Once again, the camera shut off. I'm having some technical difficulties, not exactly sure what. So this is the third part of listening, and we are talking about the internal barriers to listening. And the last one we talked about was emotionally loaded language and not reacting to it. The next one is a lack of effort. You know, listening is a very active process. It takes a lot of mental focus, a lot of mental energy. And if you aren't putting the correct amount of mental energy into it, you're not going to be able to listen effectively, which means you're not going to be able to process or remember effectively either. So that's definitely a huge thing, you know, lack of effort. Most people, because they don't have hearing issues, they don't really think about it. They don't think about putting in the focus to be a good listener, but you definitely have to put in that mental energy to be a good listener. The next one is failing to adapt to the listening style that you are engaging in. You know, there are four types of listening, four listening styles we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And each one of them requires a different amount of mental focus and a different amount of basically energy. And if you're supposed to be listening with one that requires a lot of mental focus, like comprehensive listening, but you're only applying a little bit of mental focus, like what you would for appreciative listening, then you're not able to get the information that you need to be getting. And then, you know, giving into our biases and prejudice. If you are prejudiced against, you know, let's say black people, then you're not going to listen to them. If you're biased against Republicans, you're not going to listen to them. If you're biased against Democrats, you're not going to listen to them, even if they have really good messages to say. So my moral of the story is as I said earlier, let people speak. If their message is crap, and you evaluate it as crap, then you can say it's crap. But don't judge until after they have spoken. Now, those are internal, external barriers, but there are also behaviors that we engage in that act as barriers to listening. And we're going to go through these. The first of these is pseudo-listening. Pseudo-listening is where you're pretending to listen, but you're actually not listening. This is probably what most of you do in your classes. You shake your head, but you're not actually listening. You're not using all of your brain power that you should be using, and so you're really not getting the full message. Monopolizing. Monopolizing is where you constantly are trying to redirect the communication back onto yourself. So let's say your roommate comes to you and says, "Man, I'm really struggling in my physics class." And you're like, "Oh, that's nothing compared to my anatomy class," right? "Oh man, I'm having a really tough time at my job." "Oh man, that's nothing compared to my boss." You keep bringing it back to yourself. And so you are never able to listen effectively to what your friend or your roommate is saying because you keep making it about you. Then there's selective listening. And selective listening is the part where you only focus on certain aspects of the message that you agree with or that are easy. You know, parents, if you have children, you probably are very familiar with this. Because you tell them something and they only hear that one part of the message at the end, they don't hear the first part. So when it comes to listening, you need to listen to the entire message, not just part. And that's hard. That's not an easy. I can't tell you how to do it because everybody's different. But what I will tell you is let them speak, let the whole message out, then you think about it and process it through your brain. Then you have defensive listening. And defensive listening is where people assume the negative aspect of whatever it is you're saying. So I'm sure you all have a friend who you say something to them and they get all mad. And you're like, "I just said it was a nice day." And they're like, "No, it's not." Right? They assume the worst out of everything you say. For whatever reason, oftentimes it's low self-esteem. So they assume that you can't be giving them a compliment because they feel badly about themselves. So they assume that you're insulting them even when you're saying positive things. Because that goes hand in hand with the whole point of the low self-esteem. Again, listen to the message, listen to what people are actually saying before you respond. Ambush listening. Ambush listening is where you are listening for ammo. So all you're doing is listening for them to make a mistake or to listen for information that you can use against them later, right? So you're just waiting. And then 6 months from now, you bring that out and you say, well, that's not what you said 6 months ago. And they're like, how do you remember that? That's ambush listening. That's a very common, very negative behavior. So that I have found to be most predominant on female type people. Because they pull stuff out like from 10 years ago. And you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they pull it out. So it must be a skill they have. My throat's going. I taught a 3-hour class before I did this video. And then the last type of listening behavior that is a barrier because of behavior is literal listening. And this is where you're listening to the words, but you're really not listening to the context of what's being said. So let's say, for example, you walk into your boss and you're like, hey boss, I have to have life-saving surgery that is, that could kill me. And your boss, all your boss hears is that you're going to miss time from work. And he says, well, I told you if you miss any more work, I'm going to fire you. He doesn't ask you how you doing. He doesn't ask you if everything's okay. All he can do is focus on the literal, I'm not going to be at work part of that message. He doesn't focus on the context. That's literal listening, right? Communication has context. Go back to chapter 1 and look at the communication model. It has context. And that context is very important when it comes to listening. Because if you're only listening to the words themselves, you're missing out on a lot of the message. So those are the barriers: internal, external, and behaviors. Now I talked about there are different listening styles, types of listening. And there are 4: appreciative, empathic, comprehensive, and evaluative. And each one of these requires a certain amount of mental energy, as I said. And I think of it as on a scale of like 1 to 100%. And completely arbitrary, I made it up. The whole point of the scale is just to show you how much energy each should take when compared to the other. And the first of these is appreciative listening. And appreciative listening is listening for fun. You're not listening to understand anything, you're just listening for fun. So this would be listening to the radio, a CD, stand-up comedy routine. You're doing homework, but the football game is on the radio or the TV in the other room, you can hear it. You're not really processing anything. So it takes a minimal amount of mental energy. I always say about 15%, because you need to be able to process the words to understand, but that's it. People are like, well, what if I listen to this song and I'm trying to think about the lyrics? Well, then you're not appreciative listening anymore. You're doing a different kind of listening that just happens to be to music. Appreciative listening is very low energy, because it doesn't require a lot of focus. The next one up is empathic listening. Empathic listening is when you are listening to provide emotional support to somebody. So let's say your friend had a bad day, they want to talk about it, and you just let them spill their beans to you, right? This would be like a therapist, something along those lines. A lot of people think, oh, this takes a lot of mental energy. It should take a lot. Well, not really, because they're not asking you to solve their problems. They just want to talk. Again, this is a very female type behavior, because if you remember when we talked about males and females, how do females form and maintain relationships? Through talking. Men tend to not do that. So this is a lot of times you will find yourself, dudes especially, that your wife, girlfriend, sister, mother, whatever, will be in a bad mood, and they come and they talk to you, and then you're like, well, did you do this? And they get mad at you. Well, they didn't want you to try to solve it. They wanted you to listen. If you're trying to solve it, you're no longer empathic listening. You would be evaluatively listening. When it comes to empathic support, be mindful, be aware, be empathetic. Don't express judgments. Like if you say to them, well, did you try this? What they hear is, oh, you're too stupid to have tried this. Because they're in a mental state right now, they're upset. That's why they're in need of somebody to listen to them. So you have to be careful when expressing judgment. Try to understand their point of view. Put yourself in their shoes. paraphrase to them. So what you're saying is you've had a really rough day at work. And that way they know you're listening to them, they know you got their back, but you're not trying to fix anything. Oh, if you ever need anything, I'm here for you. Express that support. That's empathic listening. But again, it takes about 35% of their mental energy because you're not trying to solve anything. All you're doing is listening with enough focus to understand the language and to know when to respond and what to respond appropriately. That's it. If you are listening with more mental energy, you are trying to solve the problem. That's a whole different kind of listening. The third type of listening is comprehensive. This is what you do in school. You're learning to, you're listening to learn, to understand a message. This requires about 75% of your mental energy because you have to be able to process it and think about it. That's the third. The fourth one, evaluative or critical listening, is where you're listening not only to gain understanding, but to evaluate that message, like yes or no, good or bad, like a salesman, a politician. That is evaluative listening. You're listening to see whether their message is true or false. Is it right? Is it wrong? Requires how much mental energy do you think?
Okay.
100%. 100%, all of it. Because not only are you listening to comprehend, which is 75%, but you're kicking it up to the next level. So 100% of your mental energy, which is why we elect stupid people president half the time. Or not just president, any political office. Because people aren't listening to what they say. They're not evaluating their message. And so when it comes time to vote, they are basing their opinion on a lack of information. Example, I'm a libertarian, I'm in the middle politically speaking. In 2008, when President Obama was running for office first time, his big message was hope and change. That was his rhetoric, hope and change, hope and change, hope and change. What does hope and change actually mean? It doesn't mean anything. It means whatever you want it to mean. And that's what he can do as a politician. He can say something that says everything, it means everything to everybody, but at the same time, it means nothing to nobody. And it's empty words. And he was promising this and promising that. I'm not going to raise taxes. I'm not going to do this. But my brain, my very, very critical, evaluative brain, said, wait a second, he's a Democrat. The Democratic National Party raises taxes. They always have. They have since the early part of the 1900s. They raise taxes to pay for social programs. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying that is what the political party does. So my brain is saying, how can he say that he's not going to raise taxes when his party raises taxes? That's critical listening. Like, the message that he's saying does not jive with my brain. So then he gets elected, he gets inaugurated, and then 3 days later, what happens? He raised taxes. He raised taxes on cigarettes, tanning, and was the third thing that I can never remember. That didn't impact me in any way, shape, or form. And didn't impact most of my friends in any way, shape, or form. But I have a lot of Democratic friends who were angry. They were mad because they felt like they were lied to. Because they said, you said you weren't going to raise taxes. But I'm like, well, what? Do you think that he was going to be able to buck this 100 plus years of tradition? No. And so they weren't critically listening at all. They weren't using the appropriate amount of mental energy. And like empathic listening, when it comes to critical listening or evaluative listening, you got to be mindful, physically and mentally prepare, control the obstacles, get rid of as much of the noise as you can get rid of. Ask questions, both probing questions, and again, probing questions are the ones that help you make a better decision, and clarifying questions, which help you understand a message better. Use mnemonic devices to help you recall things better. Organize things in a way that makes sense to you. Take notes. One of the best things you can do when going to buy a car or something like that, take notes. Because that way when you're trying to make your decision, you're like, okay, this is what the person said. Well, then you can back that up. You can look online. You can look at the actual manufacturer and say, is he being truthful to me, or is he just trying to make a sale? Well, if it's at the end of the month, he's probably trying to make a sale. He'll tell you anything because they get bonuses, pretty crazy bonuses. So those are the types of listening. And if you go back to the barrier to physical listening we're talking about, one of the barriers is not using the appropriate type of listening. So when you come into class, you're supposed to be comprehensive listening, at the very least, probably evaluative listening in some classes, but you're applying the amount of mental energy that you would to listening to a CD. You're not going to be listening or retaining or being able to recall very much. So those are the types of listening. And the last thing is, some guidelines to be an effective listener. Be mindful. As I've talked about in the past, being mindful is a way to improve everything, whether it's listening or perception or whatever. Being aware of your strengths and your weaknesses as a listener are going to go a long way. Make sure that you are using the appropriate type of listening in the appropriate situation. That's a pretty easy one to deal with. So if you're supposed to be listening, like in class, with a comprehensive style, 75% of your mental energy, apply 75% of your mental energy. How do you do that? That's up to you. I can't tell you how to do it. Everybody's different. I try to keep interested in what they're talking about. I ask questions internally. I try to predict what they're going to say next. Basically, that helps keep my mind focused on what they're speaking about. And then the last one, this is a biggie, is engage in active listening. And active listening is using all 5 of your senses plus your brain to listen. And you're like, what? Yes, I said that right. All 5 of your senses can be used to listen. I'll give you an example. Several years ago, when I was doing my master's degree in history, it was a Saturday, and I was in my office at home working on a paper. And my wife decided to make brownies. She makes awesome homemade brownies. She's actually she's a terrible cook, but she can bake very well. She's great at following recipes. She can't freestyle like I can. And I came out from my office, and I got very excited because I love her brownies, and she always saves the spoon and the batter in a bowl for me to lick. Yes, I know. It's like a 2-year-old, right? I'm cool with that because it's delicious. And there have been times when I have been away, like out of the house for the day, and she will save it for me in the fridge. But this time, I came out of my office and I noticed that the batter bowl was in the sink. And so I'm seeing things with my eyes. The batter doesn't look quite right. It looks a little grayish. And I'm like, that doesn't look quite right. Again, I'm seeing stuff. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So I go back into my office. I come out like an hour later to cut me a corner piece because I love the corner pieces. And I'm looking at the brownies, and it looks like there is sliced garlic on top of the brownies. And I was like, did you put garlic on the brownies? And she responded like this, no. So I'm seeing things, I'm hearing things, I cut it. The texture's a little weird. So again, I'm feeling something. And then I go to take a bite, and it tastes like it's lacking sugar. So now I'm tasting something. And I say to her, did you forget to put the sugar? No, just eat the damn brownies. So now I'm seeing stuff, I'm smelling stuff, I'm tasting stuff. I'm like, I can see it, I can feel it, it feels weird. Plus what she's saying, the nonverbal message, was that there was something with the brownies that was not normal. Well, what it turned out to be was she put zucchini in the brownies to try to get me to eat zucchini because I hate zucchini. And she had just read a book about slipping vegetables into people's food to get them to eat more vegetables. Well, that might work if there wasn't big, shreds of zucchini in the brownies. And so she, of course, got mad at me. But that's active listening. I used all of my senses, put it through my brain, and my brain said, something is wrong with these brownies. That's active listening. So you're sitting in class, and a person comes into class, and they're carrying a bag of Cheetos. They're all sloppy looking. Their eyes are bloodshot. They walk past you, and it smells like Woodstock, if you know what I mean. It smells like the inside of a dime bag of weed. You know what I'm talking about. And then you say, hey Joe, are you out smoking weed? And they say to you, no man, I ain't smoking weed. What are you talking about? Right? So what is the real answer? Were they actually out smoking weed? Probably, right? But if I just listen to the words and I don't use active listening, I'm going to be like, okay, you weren't smoking weed, haha. But if I use active listening and I take what I can see, what I can smell, what I can taste, what I can feel, all of those things, and I process it through my brain, that's active listening. And the real message in that case was, yes, I was smoking weed. And so that is active listening. Again, active listening boiled down using all of your senses plus your brain to get the full message. And your goal should be use active listening all the time to get the full message. Because who here wants to go around life only getting a part of the message? So that is listening. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. And that's that. Stay out of trouble, don't do drugs.